Hello, this is Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred podcast. And once again, I have another awesome guest today. Super excited to speak with Raquel Borras with Raq the Boat. It's an exciting project she's on. It's close to my heart because I have a passion towards crushing the numbers with mental health that's going on right now. And I kind of be on the demand side advocacy where I think the kids are the future. The kids are the answer. And that's where your heart is, Raquel. And that's where I followed you on LinkedIn, where I meet most of my superhuman friends today. It seems like it's on LinkedIn. And you just have this amazing aura about you that I think draws people to your story. And I know you're real passionate about mental health and specifically with kids. So again, welcome to the Living Undeterred podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. I've got my coffee here and my, my breakfast. So good.
Your egg white and fruit or whatever you're having. So
Yeah, my egg white bites. Yes. But no, I'm excellent. Thank you for having me.
how long have you been on LinkedIn? I'm just curious. I'm fairly new to LinkedIn. I basically had no social media presence until we went through our personal tragedy. And then I reached out kind of social media for support for friends. I kind of felt like I was painting myself in a corner, isolated and trying to take care of the family after Seth passed. And LinkedIn and specifically LinkedIn really was a great place for me to hang out. And I tend to follow people that are optimistic and positive. But in your case, I mean, what were your reasons why you dove into social media? Because I know you have a great presence. And how do you feel about what you're getting out of social media right now?
So for me, it was just kind of a fluke, if you will, to getting on LinkedIn because I had gotten off of Facebook. I hadn't been on it for about 3-4 years because I had gotten divorced, and the last thing I wanted to do was just deal with the Facebook.
Yeah. Everyone's pictures of their
Ridiculous.
travels and
Yeah,
anniversaries.
like,
And
oh wait, I
yeah,
don't see any pictures of you and your
pour a little
husband. What's
more
going
salt
on?
on the wound, right?
Yeah, I just was, I kind of was self-aware enough to know that it was just going to be toxic.
Yeah.
So I got off of Facebook, hadn't known about LinkedIn, but then got on Instagram. But Instagram was still in its infancy stages. And the only reason why I got on was because my son had got on and I knew that, it was kind of like an up and coming platform just for pictures. And I just started getting emails. I actually went into the corporate world for the first time in 2013. And so I'm getting these emails of like, join LinkedIn. I'm like, what is this LinkedIn
Right.
thing? And after a while, I was like, you know what? If I'm not going to do Facebook and Instagram is just pictures, and I'm trying to navigate the corporate world, being a single woman and, not having had a career before I got married, I was like, all right, I guess this is what I should be doing. And when I got on there 8 years ago, it was completely different than what it is now,
Mm-hmm.
where, someone like yourself getting on there, you knew that you could meet like-minded people, build relationships. That's exactly why I got my best friend Nancy on there, because she was experiencing the same thing that you were. I need people that that I can really build strong,
Mm-hmm.
like real relationships with. And some people might think, okay, but that's still online and it's social media. How
Mm-hmm.
can you actually build these type of relationships? I'm like, well, I'm a testament that I've built some incredible relationships that have now become family. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn is everything.
Yeah. I mean,
because of that.
myself included, I kind of hesitated in getting too heavy in social media. I never was on
Yeah.
Facebook at all. And then when I formed the nonprofit, that's when I thought, well, how am I going to promote the nonprofit? How am I going to advocate? How am I going to collaborate with other like-minded people? Well,
Yeah.
social media was out there. And I know LinkedIn, when I first got on, there was some criticism of people sharing personal stories and being vulnerable. But I think what we found
Yeah.
out was that stigma became broken because we all benefit from hearing I write about this in my book, in the midst of someone else's chaotic life, we can see as an observer either how not to live a life or how we can be resilient and live undeterred through watching someone else. And I really benefited following some people I met that are suicide moms and suicide dads and overdose moms, overdose dads, and LinkedIn just became pretty addictive for me. And I hate that word because addictive has a maladaptive definition, but I think there's positive addictions. But again, I tried to have this conversation with the doctor, and he chewed my head off because he said, nope, there's no such thing as a positive addiction, because addiction by definition is something despite adverse consequences. Anyway, this is my attention deficit going down a road. So you have to stop me if I start going down roads.
Luckily, I'm really good at following with ADD.
But no, it's not. It's not. We got to get rid of the last D.
Oh, that's right.
It's not a disorder. We just go to attention deficit and we quit right there. Okay. So attention deficit. Anyway, so LinkedIn just was this thing that I just got really attracted to, and I followed some people for a while, and then I got a little turned off because their tone became too negative, too angry. I don't want to be an angry dad out there. That's not what I want to be. My son died, fentanyl, wife died of alcohol. And the last thing I want to do is be out there preaching and yelling and screaming and trying to be this, angry person out there to change the narrative. It's like, I think as an advocate, there's two ways to focus on behavior. We can try to get mad and scare people, or we can be positive and inspirational. And I think getting mad and scaring people is how you raise awareness. I think to bring attention to issues, you have to provide hope and inspiration. So again, I met Nancy Barros, and that's who you talked about earlier. She was literally one of my first guests on my show. I saw Nancy make a post about what she went through with her sex abuse, and she's talked about it at length on social media. So I feel comfortable bringing that up, obviously. But I just thought, wow, what a rock star! I didn't go through that. I wasn't sexually abused. I don't know what that's like, but to have the courage as a woman to come out, and talk about that, I thought, I got to get her on my show, and Danielle McLean was another lady I met on LinkedIn, that similar type story. Now she runs like a CEO of an engineering aviation type company. So just another rock star. And they were two early women I had on my podcast that I really wanted to highlight and give them a platform to talk to people. And as that door opened, more people started coming out that I knew about sex abuse and stuff. And so I kind of got pulled into this area that I didn't intend to get into, but that's what this journey is all about for me, is going down one road and then getting distracted, healthy distractions down another. So LinkedIn, I found out, was this amazing community, if you follow the right people, that literally has made my life I've become a better person meeting other people on LinkedIn. Facebook's a whole different deal. I don't even want to talk about Facebook.
I'm not on it.
No, I'm on it. I have to be. And I tend to I maybe accept one out of every 20 friend requests I get. And I just try to follow people and when anyone gets off on Trump or politics or anger things, I just unfollow them gracefully. But anyway, so your passion is with kids, right?
Yeah,
Talk about that.
Even when I was young, I always thought I was going to be a teacher. I've just always been someone that, even as a kid, liked kids, right. Even though I was very mature for my age, and also was very good with adults. For myself, I don't know. I thought I would always end up doing something with children. So I remember my internship in my senior year at school. I went back and I worked at my old daycare.
Cool.
Which was kind of cool. Yeah. And so I did that. And then when I was in college, I was an art history major, and I taught art classes too for a woman that had kind of her own business. So I've just always just had this affinity towards kids. I knew I wanted to be a young mom. I mean, my parents to this day laugh about how, they kind of were just like, we don't see you having like an actual like corporate career. We see you just being a mom. Like my mom always talks about how like, that's what I wanted to be. I just wanted to be a young mom and raise kids. So for me, it's always been there. It's just that, life happens. And
how many brothers and sisters did you grow up with?
I grew up with a younger brother who's 5 years younger, and my sister's 14 years younger. So my sister was actually like my little toy, in the sense that at age 14, I was taking care of her, changing her diapers, feeding her. I mean, I was obsessed with my sister. I mean, I have so many pictures of her in my arms while I'm doing my homework, just watching TV.
Like your own daughter.
Yeah, no, seriously. So for me, I mean, my mom was older when she had her. And so my mom was already kind of at that age of like, she was tired.
Right.
And so she had me, and I just absolutely loved it. So, I kind of had my own child as a teen, if you think about it. And, so it wasn't until till COVID that, Raq the Boat came about. And I have a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old, and I was seeing how it was affecting their lives, just, the mental health crisis. And that was even before COVID hit,
Mm-hmm.
Just with social media and depression. And they unfortunately had already known kids that had taken their lives. We went to a funeral open casket where a kid shot himself, and my son's, friend. And, you're thinking, gosh, at that age that they're already experiencing kids that are taking their lives, like, this is awful. And here I try to take my life when I was in college, but it wasn't, it was different. There was no social media. So it wasn't like everybody knew. To this day, there's people that are still finding out that I actually tried to take my life when I was in college, people that knew me. Cause I wasn't like,
You actually attempted,
was
or
just
you had suicidal ideation?
I actually attempted.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I tried to, I took all my antidepressant pills, drank a bottle of wine, but I think what it did, and I kind of chuckle about it, but Nancy, she and I were living together, and she was on antidepressants, and I thought I was taking hers. Turns out I was taking her Advil. So I think the Advil might have had some kind of,
Reaction.
maybe it was protecting me. I'm not sure, but so obviously it did not work. So I actually attempted. And and then COVID comes around, and I was on LinkedIn heavily, doing a lot of podcasts, doing a lot of lives like, this about mental health, about personal branding, about just social media in general. And it just kind of came to me one day where I was like, well, no one's really asking our kids
right.
what's, how they're feeling. If anything, they're the ones that are really being affected. A lot of adults tend to get a little bit self-absorbed and have it be all about themselves. And, I thought, okay, yeah, that's great and all, but we have to focus on these kids because they're our future. And if we're sitting here complaining about our future and complaining about our kids and we're not doing anything about it, then we have no right to complain about them. That's where I get a little annoyed. Sometimes is we're so quick to say that they're entitled, that they're lazy, they're all of these things. And I wanted to actually kind of prove everybody wrong.
Right.
Cause I have, I have two really good kids and their friends are great. And so I thought, no, there's kids out there that are not what, stop labeling our kids, in one way. And so that's why I thought, well, I'm just going to go straight to the horse's mouth. And that's what I did, is just started having conversations with our kids. And now I have 66 conversations uploaded on my Raq the Boat YouTube channel. Yeah.
When I saw Raq the Boat, I checked out your website, RAQVISION and Raq the Boat. And I was just so impressed with not just the quality of what you have out there, but the emphasis on the kids. And some of these interviews you did were so cute. They were so innocent. And these kids feel like they're movie stars. Some of them are just perfect for the moment. Others, you have to kind of out of them a little bit. But I mean, a rewarding thing that you do. And the reason I say that is, so many advocates in mental health space are on what I call the supply side. They're in the recovery, they're in the rehab, they're with the addictions and the substance use and all the lies and all the just all the misery that goes in that area. And it's got to be very unrewarding for a lot of advocates that every day get lied to and they see the same people repeating the same poor choices. And they're not paid very well, a lot of the mental health advocates in those areas. And so I think it's got to be very demoralizing. But here's you talking to kids every day, on the other side of the mental health spectrum. You're on the demand side. We're on the prehab side. We're focusing on intervening before the intervention, right?
Yeah.
And that's so much more rewarding. The conversations are just, I'm smiling watching them, and I'm like, I'd love to be able to interview kids like that. That would be so fun and would make me really feel like I'm making a difference. I talk to some advocates in the recovery and rehab space, and they really feel at the end of the day, I just don't think I'm making a difference.
Yeah, that's hard. Yeah, that's why I'm doing. Yeah, because I don't want to sit here and pretend that I'm like some counselor or I have some degree in psychology or anything. But I do know that all the personality tests that I take, they all say the same thing, that I would have made a good psychologist.
Yeah.
So I do know I have that, that sensibility, if you will. But for me, I just feel that if I'm someone that can share my experience and hopefully have it help, then that's like where I'm at,
Mm-hmm.
where it's about just being able to be positive about my experience, because like you said, a lot of times we take our past experiences that are painful and that are traumatic, and we just kind of dwell in them and sit in there and just kind of woe is me. And I'm not that person. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do with my experience that hopefully can help others? And I found that talking to these kids, they really appreciate when I am very open and vulnerable about, and obviously I'm very
Mm-hmm.
mindful of who I tell, because I'm not going to sit here and have a
Right.
conversation with a young kid and suddenly be like, hey, guess what? I tried to take my life, because they would be a little bit like, what? It's the teenagers that are also talking about mental health and maybe also sharing kind of some stories. And I'll go ahead and open up to them, because most of them have no clue. They don't know why I want to talk to them.
Yeah.
So I kind of have to open up in a way so they can understand naturally, like have enough self-awareness to be like, oh wait, this woman really actually just wants to hear what I have to say, because she sees the value in having us feel heard and seen and
Mm-hmm.
empowered. And just, I think once they realize that that's all it is uh, there's no agenda whatsoever. Like for me, there isn't. I do get asked all the time, like, do you monetize what you do? And I'm like, not for, like, I don't now, because that's not why I was doing
Mm-hmm.
it. But at some point, if I can monetize it and have it be something that I can focus more on because it is being monetized, and yeah, so be it. But that's not why I'm doing this at all. It really is going to the source at an age where I feel like it can make an impact, because I took your advice. You and I had spoken, and I binged Dope Sick over the
Yeah.
weekend. Yeah, so I binged it, and once again, it just kind of reinforces how we have to we have to get in deeper. We
Mm-hmm.
cannot mask, numb. At the end of the day, it's people that have some kind of level of insecurity or some kind of something there that, obviously there's an
Right.
addictive factor to like your body, but at the same time, at the end of the day, a lot of this is about feeling numb and not wanting to feel,
Yeah. I mean,
and
if you look
so
at the movie Dope Sick, obviously people were getting prescribed opioids to not really mask anything, but to help them get through pain management. And then they
right,
became addicted to something that they were told was not addictive, and that was probably the
right.
genesis of the opioid crisis that we are currently in. But back to kids a second. What's your thoughts on why kids are so hopeless today? Now, I'm talking 5 and 6 year olds. They're always pretty bubbly, but you start getting into that,
Yeah,
you get into that 12, 13, 14, and then something pivots. Something now, obviously, it's puberty and all that. I know that,
yeah.
but there's something different in this society than there was when I grew up and you grew up, and it's like there's something different. And I think I know, but I thought I wanted to get your perspective on why kids seemingly today, with having everything, feel like they have nothing.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I guess just from what I've gathered, just from having these conversations, a lot I feel has to do with the fact that they're inundated with all this information, and their brains just really cannot process like everything that's coming at them, and it's like overwhelming. So when you're overwhelmed, that's a horrible feeling, I would think, to have, that you have all this stuff going at you, and a lot of them, they're they have no say in it, right? Like you go on the internet and suddenly you just have every information at your
Yeah.
fingertips. And so I think a lot has to do with that. And the other is suddenly you know what everybody and their mother is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that adds this whole level of competition, of insecurity, of like, I can't believe that person's doing that. And so then I feel like that adds a whole nother level of just feeling like you're not doing enough, you're not worthy enough, all of those things. I mean, you've got that. And then the other thing that you have too is that if you make a mistake, suddenly everybody
Yeah.
knows. And we're in this society where, now we call, what is it, being canceled? That you say one thing that's wrong and you're canceled and your life is basically over. And I mean, gosh, for any child to feel like if I say the wrong thing, my life is over,
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm sorry, but that type of pressure, how can you not, as a teenager feel hopeless.
I know I watch shows.
I don't know. I mean, just mentioning it, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, how does any of us like actually function?
I watch shows that I grew up with, comedy shows that were just, Steve Martin, just great, funny comedy shows. And I'm like, they couldn't make those today. A lot of the shows they couldn't make today,
Yeah.
you just couldn't. And it's like, we have this less humorous personality now, and laughter is the best medicine. And I had a comedian on the other day, as a mental health comedian. His name's Frank King, and he was on the Tonight Show as a writer. And we laughed the whole time, but we talked about suicide, his attempted suicide, alcoholism, death, and overdose. And it's like, and I got done, I'm going, dude, we're not supposed to laugh during these things. But it's like, okay, I guess the alternative is let's just be miserable. Let's take this stuff really too serious. And I'm not saying death isn't serious, but it's like, we're all going to die. We all know it. Yet we haven't found a way yet to really have a reverence and a respect towards death as we do with life. But one thing I want to talk about that you were talking about with kids, and this is kind of what I was going to ask you, is, the difference between, I'm a little bit older than you, but when I was a kid, we just went out in the backyard and we had curiosity, and we had an open mind, and we looked and observed and we learned. And today kids don't have to think because the phone does all the thinking for them. So they are terrified. Mm-hmm. They are terrified to be alone. They're terrified to look at a wall for 5 minutes and have to be creative and observe their thoughts, because this thing in their hand is making all the decisions for them. So we just have this generation growing up with their anxiety levels are so high because, quite honestly, they're just not comfortable being alone with themselves. They have to be distracted from the reality of them. And that disillusion of self is troublesome to me. I know phones aren't going away, so I'm not going to try to be that one saying let's have a prohibition of phones. Yeah. But how do we get kids to get more in tune with who they are, so they can develop coping mechanisms to fight the inevitable train wreck of mental health coming their way? It happens to all of them. All kids have to do is just watch their parents argue. They have to watch their neighbors get divorced, watch kids at school come and complain about the house they live in. They know this train wreck's coming. They're certain of it. How do we prepare them? How do we arm them with the tools so when this train shows up, they can just watch it go by? I struggle with that.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because even now, I have a 18-year-old and it's her freshman year in college, and almost every day she's like, one day she's like, I want to transfer, the next day she's okay. And it's like, she's all over the place. And as a parent, I'm trying to give her advice, but then she gets annoyed because she's like, you say the same thing, Mom. And, and I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, well, how, like, I gotta kind of empathize and, with her. But at the same time, I'm her mom. So it's like, I have to kind of just change her mindset a little bit and all these things. And I'm thinking like, gosh, I have a really good kid.
Right.
Like, she's such a good kid. And yet I'm having issues with being able to like communicate with her that like, hey, this happens. Like, this is life. Like, not every day is going to be like this great day in college, like there's plenty of other people that are going through the same thing. And it wasn't until my ex and I had a conversation after, and my ex and I are really close. And he's like, yeah, it turns out that one of her sorority sister was like, listen, I just had this conversation with 5 other girls experiencing the same thing. They're homesick. They don't know anyone. So I think so then I was like, that was the key for her, was to realize that other girls were experiencing the same thing. She's not alone. And then that's when it really clicked. I'm like, that's what it is. It's like, so many of us think that we're the only ones going through that experience. Mm-hmm. And, as a parent, you can say all you want, but it's not until one of their peers validates what they're feeling. And the fact that she had a peer validate, and the peer was also very, much about like, what, let's hang out tonight. Like, you don't feel, you don't have any plans. Like, let's go shopping. Let's go eat. Like, I love that her sorority sister was like, all right, you know what? We're going to get out of your head and we're going to have some fun and just, just kind of hang out. And that's really key. And I think that we need to encourage more of that as parents, because I think that's another thing. A lot of parents want to be the ones that are fixing everything. They want to be the ones that know everything, that they, give the right advice to their kids. And sometimes we can do everything right, but it's still not going to work, So I think that's a lesson as well.
The terrifying aspect of all this is when we were younger, my parents would say, well, toughen up, fight through it. I grew up with three brothers. Mom would have food on the table and she wouldn't tell us when to come in. But if you didn't come in and eat, my other brothers eat all the food. So it's like, you just learn to kind of think on your own. We didn't have a lot of structure.
Yeah.
I could go out a couple neighborhoods over and play basketball till dark and come back. And that's the environment we grew up in. Today, it's just a lot more controlled. And I think with fairly good reason,
Yeah.
but bad stuff happened back then. We just didn't know about it. Today, we know about every jogger that's abducted or every person who's, shot at a restaurant or something. We hear about these things and we tend to think that they're more prevalent and more frequent, but it's just more distributed today. But, going back to this issue with kids, it's like, so how do we as advocates empower kids to make better choices in difficult situations? What it seems to me what's happening is we just keep adding layers of complexity, like more labels. Like, this kid's got this issue. Let's just make up a label so we can file an insurance claim, for example. And so we just kind of label these kids. So kids growing up think that they actually have a disorder when maybe they're just human. Maybe attention deficit, depression, anxiety, just maybe these are things we all have. And it's not one kid has depression, the other doesn't. It's just one kid understands how to manage it better. Maybe subconsciously they manage it better. I've never had depression. I don't spend a lot of time trying to think about depression. With attention deficit, I tried it a few times, didn't like it, and I quit. I just wasn't good at it. I'm not being sarcastic. It's just, I don't have a lot of time. I don't sit around thinking about things too much. And when I do,
I don't have time for
it. And I'm not,
I did back in the day. I don't
and I know
anymore.
people watching this will say, oh, Jeff, that's, you're just wrong because you're lucky. And it's like, well, okay, I am, then maybe I'm lucky, but maybe I reframe things differently than a lot of people too. And that comes back to just some things I read about Stoicism back in college that really piqued my interest in my philosophy and psychology classes, was the concept of reframing. And why don't we teach, instead of sitting down and telling our kids all about the terrible things about drugs, why don't we talk to them about the great things about making better choices? Why don't we talk about the great things about this thing called attention deficit they have that's actually an asset for them in their life, not a punishment? We don't do that. We set them up for failure at a young age by labeling them. And if we really looked at something as simple as attention deficit as a society, as something really healthy and good and can be nurtured in a good way, think of the millions of kids growing up that really would believe that they were anointed something special instead of being cursed. I've always had a problem with that. And that's just one subset of diagnosis that I have an issue with. And I even have issues with the word sobriety and alcoholism and all that stuff. It's just, why do we feel necessary to have to put labels in everything? Maybe the label is we're just human.
Yeah, I know I have an issue with the labels too, because I know that affected me as a child. Because my parents kept saying, like, I'm this, I'm that. It got to the point where, and I joke around how I was like the white sheep of the family.
You weren't the black sheep.
I wasn't, no, because I was among a family, a bunch of black sheeps, and I was the white sheep in the sense that, my aunts and uncles and my cousins, they labeled me as Miss Frances Parker. And Frances Parker is the middle school and high school that I went to. But because I was a rule follower, because I was very much about like, this is how things are done. And I would, have just kind of was a perfectionist and so forth. And I just was that kid. I got labeled and I felt like that was a bad thing because all of my cousins, they're all like super egocentric, and now they're all, a bunch of them are like actors and musicians, and I think I'm the only person out of the entire like family that has a corporate job, like a 9-to-5. They're all entrepreneurs. They're all like, so just imagine me among all my cousins in Mexico feeling badly about myself because they kept labeling me as this like perfect child. And you would think that that's a cool thing, right? Like, wow, I'm perfect.
A burden.
But no, it's like, it's a burden. Yeah. To live up to that expectation. It was really hard. And that's a lot that attributed to my depression, was knowing that I couldn't be perfect. And that was depressing to me. And so for me, even to this day, I still am labeled and I still have trouble because for instance, I've always been told you're such a social butterfly, you're so extroverted, you're so this, and I'm starting to realize I'm becoming more introverted. I'm becoming a little bit more, I don't like to party as much as I used to, all these things, but people are like, oh, and it's hard because I even had one of my girlfriends from college who I'm still friends with. She's like, hey, we're going to go out with my aunt. And apparently she told her aunt that I was like this, I was such a fun person and I'm such a good time and I'm a blast and like, just building me
Yeah.
up like this, like we're going to woohoo, turn it up. And I just wasn't in the mood
Right.
for it. We went out and the aunt was almost like really disappointed of like, wow, you told me that she was going to be fun and she was a fuddy-dud. And I was like, it wasn't that I was a fuddy-dud. And she's like, you didn't have fun. I'm like, it's not that I didn't have fun. It's just that I don't choose to be on all the time. Like I was actually observing. I'm in a new town. I was observing the new people. I wasn't upset. None of those things. I just wasn't living up to what you were, and that's even at a 47-year-old. I'm like, geez, and then you start thinking like, wow, I just disappointed those people hardcore because I wasn't, like partying like crazy that night.
It's just an evolution. That's all it is.
Yes.
And I think
And so
that's one of the chapters in my book called The Evolution of Self. And I think it's important that we tend to kind of wait for this midlife crisis to happen. And I think I talked about this the other day with you.
Yeah.
And I immediately thought about going back to the kids. I keep going back to kids, is it maybe we need to have like a teen life crisis perspective, because we tend to have this reactive mindset where we'll wait for the forest fire, we'll get everybody together with thimbles, and we'll go try to put out the fire. And this isn't working. And I mean, if the data said suicide rates are down, depression is down, overdoses are down, alcoholism death are down, then I think the way we were doing things, we just magnify and do more of it and replicate it. And we would see people's lives, quality of life, well-being improve. People will look in the mirror and feel better. None of that's happening at all ages. I mean, the highest year-over-year suicide rate that I saw a statistic on was white middle-aged men. I mean, it's me. Highest year-over-year, not numbers, but percent increase. So, I mean, what's going on with white middle-aged men? I have my thoughts on that because I am one, but it's like, there's just seems to be a lot of messes in every aspect of humanity we need to clean up, that we need to really figure out ways to right the ship here, because I think we're just heading into some really rough seas in the next couple generations if we don't figure out ways to get this thing fixed pretty quickly here, and I think, again, it goes back to, is getting this thing fixed, getting Raquel to stop drinking 2 bottles of Pinot Grigio, every night, or is getting this fixed, getting a 5-year-old to empower them to understand you have more control over your life than what you think you do, and show them, not tell them, but show them really healthy, constructive ways they can live an intentional life. I don't know, what's your thoughts on how we right this ship? Because I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I'm very concerned. I had a conversation with one of my childhood friends. We just saw each other and we were talking about how as parents and as adults, like you said, obviously nothing's really changed. So I think as adults, we also have a lot of responsibility. And as parents, we have a responsibility, and because she has 2 teenage kids and they're good kids too. And, she was telling me how their school, they don't have textbooks. Okay. Like for both her kids go to 2 different private schools, and they're not allowed they address each other like the adults, like the teachers, by their first name. It's not like, Mr. J, it's, hey, Jeffrey. And so some people might think that's like a completely radical way of educating our kids. But at the same time, like, hey, if it's nurturing these kids in a way that they're becoming kinder, better human beings, and maybe then so be it, right? Like, then I'm okay with you calling me by my first name. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm Miss Boras to you, and how disrespectful, because I feel like that's how we've always been. We were taught to be like, you respect your elders, and the only way to do it is by, addressing me by my last name and by, listening to what I have to say. And I'm realizing that, like you said, things we're evolving, so we have to also evolve the way we think. And so I think a lot has to do with how we're parenting our kids as well, which could be, once again, a lot of people could sit here and be like, okay, she's a little bit cuckoo, but all I know is that from the friends that I have that are kind of parenting their kids a certain way, they have kids that, yeah, it doesn't mean that they're perfect kids, but they have kids that are willing to come to them and trust them and be open with them. And I think that is really key, is having these kids feel like they can trust their parents and come to them when there is an issue and when there is a problem, that they can talk to them about it. I think that in itself is a lot of what's happening. Is, a lot of these kids feel like they can't go to their parents, and then what happens? I don't know, but I do feel like we have to start kind of doing things differently. And, there's gonna be some older generations that are gonna be like, okay, you're nuts, and that's okay, because your kids are probably like probably already have grandkids. So this is more for the parents that are, younger, and maybe their kids are younger, and maybe it's just looking at that dynamic differently.
If what we were doing was working, we wouldn't be interested in new alternatives, because we would just keep doing what we're doing. But I can't see many statistics that are getting better, and so that's what's frustrating for me. But I'm trying to remain open-minded, trying to look at all options on the table. But I do think that we spend an inordinate amount of time and money putting out fires and less time on preventing fires. And if we focused on prevention, then, for example, just let's talk about health, just health in the United States. We're the heaviest industrial country in the world, and we're getting bigger. Yet we have more knowledge and information we've ever had at our fingertips and technology to lose weight. Granted, there are some people that are born that way. I get it. That's not what I'm talking about. And people just go off on tangents to defend an agenda, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to fat shame anybody. I'm just simply saying this, that over 80% of the health problems that adults have are directly attributed to their diet and lack of exercise. I don't think anyone can argue that. So we know all that. And each year we get more labels. There's more documentaries, there's more everything, but we just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So where lies the problem? More data, more information, more research, or changing human behavior? It's painfully clear to me. It's behavior. And it's no different with addiction and substance use disorder, or distress, I call it now. I don't even call it disorder. It's substance use distress for me. Is, again, do we need more data on AA works, or more, more data on a deep dive into further diagnosis of these subsets of diagnosis? And we just keep micromanaging this problem. Maybe Occam's razor is correct. Maybe the simplest solution is normally the best solution, and we've overcomplicated this mental health crisis we're in. I think I don't have answers. I have more questions than I have answers, and that's why I have a show, and that's why I invite people that
that also have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we both. So at the end of the show, people are going to say, I didn't learn anything from this show.
Anything. These people are just,
But it's like, I run into so many advocates, and they're so passionate about what they do, and they're so rigid in willing to change their mindset. And then they just think that I have the answer to all the problems out there, and this is my way or the highway. And that mindset, I'm lucky I don't have that mindset. I'm lucky I'm more of a scientist mindset, that I like to keep inquiring. And I actually listen to podcasts that are against what I believe in purposely, because I don't want to fall trap to an echo chamber. So, a lot of people who are staunch, say, Republicans, they'll watch Fox News all night. They'll watch Tucker Carlson. They'll watch Trump rallies, and they'll just reinforce their behavior because they don't want to be challenged, because it forces them to have to think. And most humans don't want that. We want the validation. And so in the mental health space, the same way. Most of the people online tend to follow people that subscribe to their beliefs, and they pat each other on the back. And very once in a while, you'll see someone come in and kind of stoke the fire a little bit. And I like to jump on and follow those people. I'm more inclined to follow somebody who's a little confrontational. It makes a pretty good point. I like to follow those people, add them to my list of my think tank of knowledge that I can follow. And again, I think that's counter to what most people do. Most people just like to and follow people that talk like them and sound like them, And that, again, that just makes it harder for us to get out of these problems if we're closed-minded, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm also of kind of the mindset where I also want to be able to think for
Mm-hmm.
myself. So a lot of times I don't even pay attention to all the motivational
Mm-hmm.
gurus, inspirational gurus, because at the end of the day, I was like, I know what's best for me. And I know I have a really great inner voice and I'm pretty smart and
Mm-hmm.
pretty self-aware. So a lot of times, like, I, I'm just kind of like, I'm not going to listen to you because I don't need you to tell me how to live my life when this is my life. And I think that's another thing too, is that there's so many people out there that want to tell you how to live your life. And that's another thing too, is you have all these kids. If you have all these people telling you how to live your life, then we're still reinforcing them not to think for themselves. Right. Like, and usually all these inspirational, motivational, they're giving you what they think is the best remedy to not have a horrible life or to not go through
To
things.
avoid
Right. And
it.
I'm thinking, but no, to avoid it. But once again, that's what life is all
Right.
about.
Right.
So like even in the movie Dope Sick, Michael Keaton's character had mentioned something in the rehab in the circle about like we're always going to experience pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like pain's always going to be there. It's part of life. It's just like navigating through that pain. So that's kind
Mm.
of where I also have a little bit of an issue of like we're trying to glorify how if you follow this, this, and this, and this formula, then your life's going to be great
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be fit and you're going to be this and you're going to be successful and all of these things. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. But like, come on, the majority of the people are not going to be able to follow that regimen.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they can't, then they're going to all, guess what? They're going to feel like crap about
Right.
themselves because they're like, I wasn't able to implement what this person was telling me. So I feel like we're also kind of in this weird thing with society right now where everybody's so quick to tell everybody else like the best way to live and the best way to be successful. And I'm just kind of like, can I just live my life and figure it out? And so be it.
Right.
You
You
know?
know, and I think you can anoint yourself anything today on social media. You can put a label.
Yeah.
You can put a label, you
Everybody wants to
know,
think you're an expert or whatever.
right.
Like when people address me as like an expert of social media, I'm like, I am no expert. Are you
Mm-hmm.
kidding me? Like, I don't like it. Like, or when people ask me to share a bio, I'm like, don't just introduce me as Raquel Borras. Like, I don't need this whole list of things that I've done. Like, who cares?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, like, I can tell you all these things that I've done and all these labels, but if I'm not like walking the walk and leading by example, then who gives a crap about all of those things? Because there's a lot of people that rely on that bio and that list of, and I'm just not that person. Like I actually get annoyed when people get introduced and it's like, and they're this and this
I
and this
know.
and this.
I was on a podcast the other day.
And I'm like,
I was on a podcast, and you know, the individual went to my old LinkedIn profile because I scrapped it. I did exactly what you said. I took all my
yeah,
boards I'm on, took all that off. I just put down my
yeah,
story. I wanted to be a storyteller,
yeah,
and that's what I think I'm good at. I'm not an expert in anything, but and so this
yeah,
person got my LinkedIn bio, and after about 2 minutes of reading things, boards I was on 15 years ago that I don't even participate
yeah,
in, I just thought I got to go into LinkedIn and just get rid of this whole thing because this isn't me anymore. 5 years ago,
yeah,
5 years ago, I died. I was reborn, and I'm a completely different human being than I was 5 years ago. If
yeah,
you'd have met me 5 years ago, I was hyper focused on making money. I was pretentious. Now in hindsight, at the time I didn't realize all this, but in hindsight, I realize it
yeah,
now. Money was something I wanted to accumulate. Now it's more of a ways to a means to help people. Now it's allowing me to buy an RV and do things that I can get a lot of meaning and purpose out of. So it's like, but I think we all have parts in our lives where we die. Maybe
yeah,
it's at 5 years old when you got sexually molested. Maybe that person previous to that died, and now you have to rebuild a life
yeah,
up. And maybe it's at 60 when you're diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It's like not the healthy Jeff died. Now it's the unhealthy Jeff. And it's like, I think evolution is so important as a
mhm,
adaptive skill, have that mindset that we are never the same. We either grow or we die. Like I think Dr. Phil said, you can either be busy living or be busy dying. Somebody said that
right,
quote.
yeah,
And,
Yeah.
some quotes are really cool. I'm like, that's a good one, and I think each day I have that mindset, and I think you have the same mindset, and a lot of people that follow us and listen to podcasts like ours have that growth mindset. Someone that I listen to, you should listen to this podcast. It's by Scott Barry Kaufman. It's called the Psychology Podcast. It's a very good podcast. He's got a great sense of humor. He takes the complexities of psychology and has a really good, one of my favorite podcasts out there. And he has a new book out called Choose Growth. And in that book, he talks a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he's a big Maslow disciple. And actually in the book, he continues a lot about some of the things about Maslow that people didn't know. And I just think to myself, it's like, there's so much of the mind that we haven't tapped. And the moment we think we have things figured out, or you think the solution to the problem, well, first of all, we probably don't even have the problem identified correctly.
Yeah.
How in the hell can we have solutions when we don't really even have the problem identified? So we spend a lot of times in mental health on the symptoms, on the drugs, on the alcohol, on the jail, on the opioid, like fentanyl, on China, on the borders. And it's like, those are all symptoms of an underlying issue. If kids didn't feel like they had to do drugs, then the supply would whittle up and go away. In theory, that's supply and demand.
It's hard. I know, but it's tough. Like, that's the thing is, like,
it is hard.
It's work. It is really hard. Cause like, even when, every now and then I won't like drink for a month, like I'll just not drink for a month.
Is that hard?
Every time I want to go, it at times there's some months where it was like no big deal whatsoever. And then it depends, I think, on what I'm going through in my life. But what I've noticed is like, I want to drink because I do want to numb like those emotions. And then I have to sit there and think, well, what is it? Why do I want to numb these emotions? And what am I feeling that I want to go ahead and just like go for a drink, right? So like I sit there and I try to do the work in that moment of like, all right, Raquel, well, this is when things are coming up. This is when you have to do it. But it sucks, right? Like it's work and it's painful. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people just don't want to have to do that. And I think just as a society in our world, the thought of having to like actually like face our issues, I think that's like one of the main reasons why we're so quick to be like, well, let's just, give a pill, or let's just, do something that's just more superficial, band-aiding things, because it is hard to like actually discover what it is that, you're going through and why.
During COVID, alcohol usage went up like 70%. So
oh my gosh!
So not only and they're delivering alcohol to people. It's like,
oh my
it's like, gosh. Come on, seriously, we're alone. We're alone. We're sad. We're depressed. We're watching, sappy Netflix movies all day long.
Yeah. Oh, I drink so
right.
much.
And then, like, geez, I can order beer on Uber and have it delivered. Again, it's just like, it's like, man, that's
it's that boredom, it's the this, it's the that. And so even the recycling guy, all their neighbors would joke around like, oh my gosh,
we talk.
Exactly. Everybody thinks that like everybody's an alcoholic because it's just like bottles of wine than wine. But, it's easier to just drink for a lot of us than to actually sit there and and deal with ourselves.
But I will tell you this. It can become easier not to drink. I will honestly tell you that. For me, it's easier not to drink. It's not even a want or a need type analysis. It's if I have two roads, the easy route of drinking, the easy route of not drinking. Most people say it's hard not to drink. It's easier. I'm sorry. It's hard not to drink. It's easier to drink. I say it's easy not to drink, or easy to drink. It's easy not to drink. It just depends on, for me, it's just easier not to drink. It's more convenient in my life. I feel better at 56. I sleep better. I don't say things I'm going to regret or post something at midnight when I'm mad about something. But I want to go back to something that I was going to ask you your thoughts on this is that what's your thoughts on the biggest challenge we have with kids in regards to their mental health. And what do you think the biggest challenge is for us as adults? What are we up against? What's the fiercest competitor we have to get our kids to understand the road that they're on?
I think going back is communication.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that connection, communication. Like we've lost all of that. Like we just kind of, we'll see our kid on a phone and we'll just like, they're busy. Like I think we just have to be just more proactive. I really do. It's tough, but you know, I don't know if I told you this, but I might have shared this story on a live the other day, and it was like very heartbreaking for me. But that's when I realized, like, we got to do better. We got to do better. I was at a restaurant and I was just ordering the food. It's one of those where you're ordering it and you've got like, you know, tables, and I was, you know, and I was looking around, and I'm very observant, and I noticed that there was a mother with her two boys, and one of the boys, the younger one, was on his phone. She's on her phone. And the one across from her was like maybe 10 or 11. And he's like, "Hey, Mom, so I got made fun of at school today again." Like clearly he gets bullied.
Mm-hmm.
And she's kind of like ignoring him. And she's like, "Mom, like I got called Shrek again today." And he's clearly trying to tell her about this situation.
And your blood's starting to boil probably right now.
And already I'm like, oh my gosh, stupid kids, you know, and I'm like, gosh, here we go, bullying, you know, and so he's like trying to get his mom's attention, and she's on her phone, and finally she's like, what do you mean? Like she was annoyed with him that she's sharing this story. I think because as a mom, nobody ever wants their kid to be the one that's bullied, right? Like you just don't want to be that parent to have that kid. So the way she responded, it was almost like she was annoyed that he was the one getting bullied, right? So, and then she just stopped and went back to her phone and just ignored him.
Boy, that's the one chance that he was going to open up to her on that topic. And she just shot him down.
And she shot him down, and I was so angry. Like it took everything in me, Jeff, not to go over there and just throw the phone out of her phone and be like, "Listen to your child. He's trying to tell you something. Like this is your chance." And she just ignored him, and you could tell he was disappointed that his mom wasn't paying attention to him and essentially didn't care. And so as I was walking by and I looked at her phone, she was just scrolling through her Facebook. Yeah. Like it wasn't like she was, you know, and I left that restaurant and I just started crying. Yeah. Like I sat in the car. I actually get emotional just every time I talk about it, because it
feel so sorry for that kid.
Because I thought that kid, if he does something like, and you almost feel like guilty, like, but then at the same time, it's like you want to be respectful of other parents, you know, the way they parent and so forth. But at the same time, like, I could not stop thinking about that kid. I'm like, God, you know what? This is what I'm talking about. Like, we have to do something different as parents. Like we do. We can do better. Like there's great parents out there, but we can do better.
You didn't know this, but you just answered the question I asked you. What's the fiercest competitor we have? And you answered it through the story, and it's attention. Yeah. Our competition is attention spans. Parents don't have it. Kids don't have it. Society doesn't have it. And that's our biggest competition. So if you and I develop the world's greatest online platform to revolutionize the mental health of our kids today, it's based evidence, fact-based, it's simple, it's easy. Our biggest competition isn't the drug dealer. It's not alcohol. It's the attention spans. That it's not even a cell phone, because that is taking the attention. But if it wasn't cell phones, it'd be something else. It'd be computers. It'd be TV. It'd be our attention's been hijacked. And Johan Hari has a new book out called Stolen Focus. I think that's the name of it. I haven't read it yet. And it's this whole concept of a whole generation of humans, their focus and attention has been hijacked to the point where people can't do 10 minutes a day of meditation. I mean, think how ridiculous that is. 10 minutes a day of meditation.
Oh, when I taught yoga, when I was a yoga instructor, do you know how many people would leave at Shavasana right before we were going to do the last pose, which is corpse pose? They would leave. And I'm like, why are you leaving? This is the whole point of yoga is to come back is, you die and then you rebirth. You got to have your corpse moment. I don't have time. And I'm like, wow, you don't have 5 minutes of your day to literally sit and do nothing. Like, it was shocking to me that that's when people would leave. They didn't take it seriously. I'm like, that's actually the most important pose of this entire class is corpse pose, when you're sitting there with your own thoughts doing nothing.
Meditation's probably, other than not drinking alcohol, 5 years now, has been the one thing that saved my life. And not just saved my life, but put me in thrive mode and growth mode. I'm hypersensitive of thoughts, hypersensitive the fact that I don't know where they come from. I know they go somewhere. And I just observe a lot of my negative, guilt, painful, sorrowful thoughts. And I really have learned not to identify with them. And for me to, even in my book, I wrote a chapter on meditation. I never meditated till Seth died. I mean, I didn't have the time. And it wasn't just I didn't have the time. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't sit and close my eyes. My anxiety level would go up. And, that was my whole life. And so imagine kids today that are like that. And now they have cell phones and now they have something always making the decisions for them. Meditation is, I think the Dalai Lama said he could eradicate in one generation, he could eradicate human violence if he could get every child to meditate in the world. The Dalai Lama said that. And
then in meditation, you're listening to that inner voice, Jeff, right? And the inner voice is so powerful, but we have ignored that inner voice.
Well, we listen to it because it's mostly negative too.
Well, yeah. Well, and then, you're right. Training that inner voice not to be so negative. Right. But for me, it was once I started following my intuition and my gut, my inner voice just a couple of years ago, my entire world changed because it was a really positive inner voice. And my intuition was really great. I just chose to ignore it because I thought, everybody else tells you to always, it's up here, it's up here, it's up here. I'm like, no, you know what? It's actually down here for me. And so it's once again, like honoring what works for you and what's right for you. And that's another thing that, we're just not giving these kids a choice.
Yeah.
We're telling them what to think and how to think and all of those, and they know they need to figure it out too.
We've pretty much given up on kids. We really have. The story about the mom is so right, because I see more adults on their phones behind the wheel. And we say kids drive distracted. BS. Adults drive. Adults are more distracted than kids are today. One thing too, more Adderall.
Someone almost ran off the road because
more Adderall is prescribed to adults than kids today.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. And we blame the kids. We blame the kids. Oh, they're on their cell phones all the time. You know what? You're on your cell phone all the time. You're the mom right.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I try to also, being that I do speak, about personal branding and social media. That's my job. I do marketing and branding. I also try to talk about, I call it mindful social media, in the sense that if I'm going to tell you to be on social media, I also try to do it in a way where it's like, okay, try not to filter yourself like crazy. Try to be as real as you possibly can be, because what's happening is you're perpetuating a lot of the issues of these, especially young women. If you're a mom that is showing up on social media in a very unauthentic way and, using apps to slim yourself and using the filter to make your face look all contoured and perfect, well, guess what? When your teenage daughter is doing the same thing and you really cannot sit there and complain about it and get upset with her about it, because you're doing the same thing. And a lot of them are modeling what our parents are doing. It's just, and that's a lot of things. What I see that a lot, is that a lot of it's coming from the parents. And, so that's why for me, you'll see me do reels with absolutely no makeup on, my hair up in a bun, and I make fun of myself, and I just I keep it lighthearted as much as I can, because I want my daughter to feel comfortable showing up just the way she that who she is. And a lot of our kids don't feel comfortable doing that. Well, guess what? You look at the parents and they're doing the same thing.
And then you look at the other side of the fence where there's some people that are almost too revealing, too vulnerable, and to the point where I think either they're needing that daily affirmation from other people, and so continually posting about something tragic that's happened to them is their way of getting that, or they're looking for sympathy or pity. And I kind of almost feel sorry. I was in some, when I got lured into Facebook, I got asked to come into some chat rooms or whatever they're called, of families that have lost children, specifically to fentanyl, but sometimes just grief rooms. And, as a widower and looking for conversation, I joined some of these rooms thinking that I'd walk out of there uplifted. I felt terrible. I go in there and I'm going to say this, and inevitably someone's going to take it the wrong way, but I'm going to tell you how I feel. I got into these rooms and it was just sappy, sad stories and poems and songs and videos. And it's like, I get it. I understand that you need to do a video of your child and have music playing. And I get that. I'm the person too. I have a deceased child as well. I understand the need for that. But as an observer, seeing 15 of those back to back to back to back to back, and then trying to be in a positive mindset, it's very hard to do. I don't know anyone that could watch 7 hours of other people's videos of their deceased children and walk away from that feeling like I'm in a really good place right now. I mean, it just drags you down. And so I don't post a lot of stuff about Seth and Prudence for that particular reason. It's not that I don't want to. I mean, his birthday's coming up in 4 days, and Seth would have been 29 this year. He's got a 5-year-old daughter, and his date of death was the next week. He died October 4. So he died a week after his birthday. And I have a very good post I'm going to make, and it's not all about that. It's about, what are you going to do to honor the ones you've lost in the 6 day or the days between his birthday and his date of death. I'm making a post here that is intentionally written. It's taken me 2 days to design. I've had people look at it. I said, I want people to read this, and I want people to do things in honor of the ones they've lost, not to send me a quote saying, our thoughts and prayers. I'm so sorry for your loss. I don't need that. I don't need that anymore. I want you to say, Jeff, in honor of Seth, I ran 5 miles today. I haven't ran in a week. Or I gave $500 to a GoFundMe to somebody I never met, and I did it anonymously. I didn't post it on social media. I did something. I helped my neighbor out, take the garbage out. He's an elderly man. That's the context of my post. And I'm not posting it. I have one picture of Seth, and I really hope I don't get a whole lot of posts of people feeling sorry for me. I'm way past that.
I know. Yeah. I mean, that's like Suicide Prevention Month and week and day. And I didn't post anything because once again, I'm like, I don't want this to be about me, because most people know my story, but I don't need to and I don't need to do it because everybody else is doing it because it's suicide.
But we understand why they're doing it, right? I mean, I'm not trying to belittle that.
No, but that's the thing is, I'm in a different place where I've done it before, and I've done posts. But this year, I was like, you know what? I didn't want the attention. I was just in a place of because if I share my story, I'm going to get people reaching out, which is fine. But for me, once again, we have to also honor who we are. And just the fact that you can't sit in a room with people kind of doing that. I can't do that either. And I'm not trying to belittle none of that, but I also have to take care of myself. And that's my form of self-care, is being surrounded by people that make me laugh, that are people that are more about just, let's look at the positive and not sit in certain things. And that's just who I am. And I cannot, I'm not going to apologize for that, and I think that's a lot of us just kind of I don't know. We worry what other people are going to think of us. Yeah. And I just am not in that place anymore. I have to really just kind of be true to myself.
Almost every single one of those rooms that I got into to support other parents that have lost, or siblings that have lost loved ones, starts off well-intended, lots of patting people on the back, and then always somebody jumps in and says something like, well, Joe Biden's killing Americans, out of the blue. And then somebody says, well, it's not Joe Biden. It's the fact he was given Adderall. Well, now it's the doctors. And it turns into this frickin' cesspool. And I'm just like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And I don't know if people are just doing that on purpose, that they're behind a computer now. They can just throw out Joe Biden, and blame everything on the president. It's like, my son put heroin in his arm because of Joe Biden. I mean, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I
You know,
know.
it's just the most
Well, it's
ridiculous thing ever.
yes.
And it's like, so I don't participate in any of those chat rooms anymore. I didn't leave them. They didn't leave the group. I just don't open them. I get invited to, I'm not kidding you, Raquel. I get invited to 5 a week, you know,
Oh, wow.
lost moms of fentanyl or, parents against opioids. And I don't join them anymore because I know they started off well intended and they just turned into this ridiculous cesspool of negativity and anger and hatred. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you don't want to be in that
I
headspace,
don't want to do it.
and that's okay. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I know
not
where I want to spend my time, and that's in people that smile and
yeah.
laugh and they cry and they are trying to make a difference. And they're doing it with hope and inspiration, not fear and anger, Okay.
Agreed.
Before we end,
Agreed.
Raq the Boat. Tell me about
Yeah.
how people can learn about it. I have some neighbor girls next door. I'm gonna invite the older one to be on your show.
Okay.
She's gonna be so giddy and excited. So I think I'm trying to remember, she's like 11 or 9 or 10 or something. But so tell us about Raq the Boat. How can people contact you? Where is it going?
So Raq the Boat right now, it's currently on YouTube. So it's a YouTube channel. And so if you can subscribe, that would be fantastic.
I did,
and
by the
then,
way. So
I know you, and I saw you actually do it. And then I do need kids on the show, and I don't have any criteria. If you're a kid, you're perfect for the show. That's what it's all about, is showcasing our kids, all of our kids, because I think a lot of times we think our child has to be doing something spectacular or different, and I feel that every kid is spectacular and, unique in their own way, and they all deserve to be heard and feel seen and just feel special, period. So it really is not like, it's not an overproduced show. I just hit the record button on a Zoom call and see where the conversation goes. I don't have any like questions in advance. Most of these kids I've never spoken to till that moment, and that's what I love, the spontaneity of it, and just kind of that raw feel to it.
They're excited. They're so excited.
Yeah,
You're great with them.
I just
You're
think
great with
it's
them.
great. Thank you. I absolutely love it. And I have 2 18-year-olds, 2 freshmen at Penn State that are helping me with it. And they helped me rebrand, and they did a logo for me, and they're managing my Instagram page. So I love that I have actual, teens helping me with it as well. So I'm trying to lead by example, where if I'm trying to empower our kids, then what better way to do it than have them actually help me with this?
Well, and have
so
social proof be your friend, because kids will listen to other kids. They won't listen to you and me doing a lecture on mental health. But if another 8-year-old talks about their anxiety or talks about their challenges on social media, maybe their imposter syndrome, gaslight, they don't know the terms are, but they know what they mean. I think kids are more likely to say, hey, there's another 9-year-old in Iowa that has the same concern I have. That's pretty cool. And now on your site, can kids communicate with each other?
Well, that's where RAQVISION comes in, where we want to eventually get RAQVISION back off of the ground, which was having interactive rock rooms where we would have an adult facilitate, kind of moderate, in the sense like they'd come in and talk about different topics, but in a fun way. And you would have the kids in there and they'd be able to interact and also kind of learn at the same time and be inspired and have fun. So that's where RAQVISION comes in. But that's just like you said, it's getting the peers to kind of see the value in it. And when it comes to getting kids' attention, it is difficult, because we're competing with things like TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and video games and all of those things. So it's just trying to figure it out. But I'm going to continue to do what I can, control what I can control, and, just kind of see where it goes from there. I don't really have any like huge a huge vision of what this is going to be. I just know that I love doing it, and it's really fulfills me in a way that I feel like I found my purpose.
Well, purpose becomes passion when it gets personal.
Yes.
That's my quote. You have a raving fan out in Iowa now, so I'm going to do all I can to support you. I think what you're doing is awesome. I'd like to see more resources and attention and focus on the next generation of alcoholics and addicts, which is our children, you know?
Yep.
So again, very grateful to have met you and appreciate the time you've taken on the show. How can people reach out to you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, all under my name. So that's kind of the best way. Or I guess you can email me, ROCKUHT@gmail.com if you want to email me as well. But it seems like everyone either has Instagram or LinkedIn these days. So they usually reach out, through there.
And we'll have all your information when we post this on the show. So thanks for being on the show. And I look forward to collaborating with you further.